My daughter-in-law, full of anger, standing in the hallway of the house I built with my husband, and said, "This isn't your home anymore." And my son, her servant, didn't say a word. Just stood there while she packed my life into boxes. I walked out with nothing but a purse and a deed clause my husband left behind. 3 weeks later, I walked back in as her landlord, and by the end of it, I buried my own son because of her exposed her lies and took full custody of the only people that mattered. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about survival, and I'm sure you're not ready for what happened next. Before we begin, make sure to like and subscribe, and please tell me and others. What's one life lesson everyone should hear before it's too late? Share it in the comments below. Thanks. I came home on a Sunday afternoon expecting to put away some groceries and maybe start the laundry. Nothing dramatic. I'd been gone for 3 days, just a quilting retreat with my church group. Nothing fancy. But when I pushed open the front door, something felt off before I even stepped inside. The smell was different. Cleaner, emptier. My shoes weren't by the entryway. The little basket I kept my keys in was gone. I walked in, set my purse down, and called out, "Mark, nothing." The kitchen was quiet. Too quiet. Then I saw the boxes. 5 of them taped shut, stacked in a corner like some delivery waiting to be hauled away. One of them had my handwriting on the side. Christmas china. My stomach flipped. I walked to the hallway and saw that the door to my room was wide open. Inside, the bed was stripped. The dresser was bare. The framed photo of me and Frank, the one from our 40th anniversary in Branson, was face down on the floor, glass cracked. And standing right there in the middle of it was Vanessa, arms crossed like she'd been waiting. "We talked about this," she said, calm, like she was reminding me I left the milk out. "You said you'd start looking for a place." I didn't answer right away. I didn't even understand the question. What is this?" I finally said. "Where's Mark?" "He's not getting in the middle," she said. "You've made this house a nightmare. It's not working. You can't stay here anymore." My hands started shaking. "You're kicking me out." She rolled her eyes. Actually rolled them. "Don't be dramatic. You've known this was coming. You've been living here rent-free for 4 years, Anne. It's time you figured things out." I didn't know what hit harder. Her calling me by my first name, like I was some tenant, or the way she said 4 years, like I'd been squatting here out of laziness instead of grief. Frank died in this house. I buried him and then moved in with Mark and Vanessa because I couldn't function because they offered. I didn't even argue back. I just turned to go find my son. He was in the backyard by the fence, pretending to fix a broken latch that didn't need fixing. Mark, I called. He didn't look up. "Did you know about this?" His silence hit harder than her words. "Mark," I said again. He just kept fiddling with the latch like if he stayed quiet long enough the whole thing would go away. I walked back into the house past Vanessa, who was already scrolling through her phone. "You've got till tonight," she said without looking up. "Boxes are already packed." I spent the next 2 hours quietly sorting through what was left. Some of my clothes, a few framed pictures they hadn't already tossed into a bin. A mug that said, "World's Okayest Mom." Mark got me when he was 16. I didn't cry then. Not yet. It wasn't until I was in the car parked behind the Dollar General at 10 p.m. that the tears came. Not loud sobbing. Just slow, awful ones that ran down my jaw and neck like they were trying to sink me. I felt like I'd been erased. No argument, no discussion, just a box and a deadline. I stayed there overnight in the driver's seat, engine off, wrapped in a scratchy emergency blanket I kept in the trunk. In the glove box, looking for Advil, I found the little envelope Frank gave me 6 months before he died. "In case anything happens," he'd said. I never opened it. I don't know why. I was afraid of what it would say. But now I did. And inside was one sentence, You still own 51%. Below it was a copy of the deed. My name. His signature. I stared at it until the sun came up. And for the first time in 2 years, I didn't feel broken. I felt angry, and it felt like home. I didn't sleep the night I read that deed. I just sat in the driver's seat, staring at the photocopy Frank had left behind. My name typed in bold, above his signature, like some ghostly reassurance I'd forgotten I had. 51%. Not a memory. Not a box in the attic. Not a story to be denied. Ownership. Legal. Binding. And most importantly, mine. I waited until 9 a.m. sharp, then drove to Frank's old law office, small brick building on Maple, with a faded sign that still read, Goodman and Bryce LLP, though Bryce had died in '98. Frank's secretary, Linda, recognized me immediately, and within 20 minutes, I was in a chair across from Frank's son, Darren. He wore loafers without socks, called me Miss Ann, like I was his school teacher, and tapped nervously on a tablet as I laid out the document. "This is real," he said, reading it over. "Your husband didn't update the deed after refinancing in '07, which means this clause right here still holds. You're the controlling party." I sat very still. "So what does that mean?" "It means you can move back in. It means she can't kick you out. And it means if you want, you can charge her rent. You could legally evict her even." I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just nodded. "Then file the papers." He blinked. All of them. All of them. He got to work. That night, I stayed at Darlene's condo, curled up on her floral couch, eating cold chicken salad while she tried not to ask what I was planning. "Just give me 2 days," I told her, "and maybe an old suitcase." She handed me one with a broken zipper and said nothing more. I spent the next 48 hours prepping. I pulled my name from the house's utilities. I rerouted mail. I had Darren file a re-entry affidavit that would reach the county and Vanessa by Monday. And I called an old friend of Frank's retired cop named Lou, who now installs legal security systems for elderly homeowners. "Need inside cameras," I told him. "Just the living room and kitchen. I want documentation of everything." He didn't ask questions. By the time Monday came, I wasn't wearing grief anymore. I was wearing court shoes, a pressed blouse, and an envelope under my arm with every legal document I needed. I pulled into the driveway like I owned the place, because I did. Vanessa was in the front window with a cup of coffee and a face that said she'd just swallowed a bug. Mark wasn't home. I knocked, then opened the door without waiting. She stepped forward, blocking the hallway. "You can't just—" "I held up the lease. I'm not moving back in as your mother-in-law," I said calmly. "I'm moving in as your landlord." She stared at the paper. "This is a joke. The new rent is listed due the 5th of every month, utilities not included. Also, you no longer have pantry access. That's for paying tenants." Her mouth opened closed. Mark didn't approve this. Mark doesn't own the house. I walked past her into what used to be my room. It was empty, but not for long. Darlene's suitcase rolled in behind me, followed by the camera tech and 2 boxes labeled Documents and Essentials. I spent the afternoon unpacking while Vanessa stormed around the house like she could will the walls to collapse. Around 5 p.m., Mark came home. I heard his keys before I saw his face, and when he turned the corner, his shoulders dropped like he'd been carrying a mountain. "Mom," he said. "What are you doing?" "Living in my house," I said simply. He looked at Vanessa. She didn't say a word. "You filed papers with a lawyer, and the camera's legal and disclosed." He rubbed his temples. This isn't what Dad would have wanted. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab his shoulders and say, "You don't get to use Dad as a shield when you stood there and let her throw me out like garbage." But I didn't. I just said, "Then maybe you should have read the papers he left." That night, I locked my door and sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. It wasn't victory. It wasn't revenge. It was restoration, a correction. But I knew it wasn't the end, because women like Vanessa don't lose quiet. They lose loud, and I was about to find out just how loud she could get. I didn't ease into it. I came back with full control, and I made damn sure they both felt it. By Tuesday morning, I'd installed the pantry lock password protected, the Wi-Fi, changed the laundry machine's settings so they required a prepaid card, and scheduled a pest control visit without telling anyone. "We don't have pests," Vanessa barked when the man in the jumpsuit showed up. "We do now?" I said, handing him a list of places to spray. She followed me to the kitchen, ranting about boundaries, legality, personal space. But I didn't flinch. I'd printed 3 copies of the lease, 1 pinned to the fridge, 1 tacked to the hall corkboard, and 1 in a sealed envelope on her nightstand. All signed, all stamped, all legal. "This is harassment," she hissed. "This is property." "Management," I said, and walked away. She tried to call Mark into it that night, dragging him into the living room after dinner, clearly expecting him to side with her. But he just looked tired. He sat on the edge of the couch, rubbing his neck, and said, "Maybe it's temporary. Maybe we just give her space." Vanessa snapped. "This isn't a guest, Mark. She's treating us like tenants." "We are tenants," I said from the hallway. "You don't own this house." She stormed off and slammed the door. Mark didn't follow. I could see it. He was folding in on himself, the way men do when they know they're losing 2 sides of something they thought they could balance. I started watching the security camera feed every night from my phone, just routine, nothing obsessive, mostly boring until Tuesday. Vanessa left the house around 6:45 p.m. No word to Mark, didn't take the kids, just said she was meeting Julie for a wine thing. She came back at 1:12 a.m., not a wine buzz, not even drunk. She looked rehearsed. I noted it and said nothing. The next week, same thing. Tuesday night gone. Came back late. This time wearing different perfume. I smelled it in the hall. Wednesday morning, I went to my room, opened my laptop, and booked the guest room on Airbnb under a fake name. I listed it with a single rule. Tenant access only. Verified ID. No same-day check-ins. Vanessa flipped when she saw it live. "You're renting our house to strangers. It's my house, and they're not strangers. They're vetted guests. I have children. Then you shouldn't have thrown out the person who helped raise them." The first guest arrived Friday. College kid, polite, stayed 2 nights. Left a good review. Vanessa didn't speak to me the whole weekend. Sunday night, she tried to reset the Wi-Fi to block me out. Didn't work. I had the router locked in. My room with a password-protected account. She pounded on the door for 10 minutes. I didn't respond. I wanted her to feel it, the control she used to have slipping inch by inch through her fingers. Monday morning, I followed her. Just to be sure. She left in yoga pants, no gym bag, no mat. Drove 10 miles out toward the edge of town and parked outside a studio apartment complex I didn't recognize. I parked down the block. She didn't go in immediately. She stood by the door for a few minutes, pacing, checking her phone, looking nervous. Then a man came out, late 30s, hair too neat, arms too casual. He kissed her on the cheek. She kissed him back on the mouth. Full, long, not friends. She followed him inside. They stayed there for 2 hours. When she came out, she wasn't smiling. She looked sick, pale, like the performance wore her out. She drove home fast. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. I already had enough. That night, I watched the cameras. At 11:43 p.m., she opened the back door and let the same man inside. He walked straight through to the kitchen, drank from my mug, then disappeared toward her bedroom. Mark was asleep on, the couch phone in hand, completely unaware. I recorded the whole thing, uploaded it to cloud storage, saved a copy to a USB drive, and labeled it for legal use only. Then I sat in bed and stared at the ceiling for 2 straight hours. It wasn't about catching her anymore. It was about protecting what was left. Because Mark wasn't just slipping into silence, he was disappearing. And I wasn't going to let him go without a fight. I didn't show him the footage right away because deep down, I wasn't sure it would even matter. Mark had become quieter with every passing day, like some part of him had already given up and was just going through the motions. He worked later, slept on the couch more. ate like someone forcing food down just to survive. I started watching. Him the way you watch a fire that's almost out, desperate to throw something on it before it vanishes completely. The problem was, he didn't want help. Every time I tried to ask, he'd deflect with a joke or walk out of the room like my presence was too heavy to carry. It wasn't until Thursday that I finally saw what was really happening. I'd gone into the garage looking for an old screwdriver and found a locked cabinet I hadn't seen in years. One Mark used to store camping gear and paint supplies. The padlock was flimsy, the kind you could break with a butter knife. Inside was a small wooden box tucked behind a stack of paperwork and dusty extension cords. I opened it and found 3 pill bottles, none of them labeled properly. 2 had Mark's name scrawled in Sharpie, the 3rd had no label at all. I took them into the kitchen and started researching the pill shapes online. They weren't antidepressants. They were benzos, sleep aids, muscle relaxants, one of them dangerously addictive when mixed with alcohol. And Mark had been drinking again. Not heavily, but enough to matter. Enough that it made sense now why he'd started forgetting things, slurring sometimes when no one else noticed. That night, I waited until he got home. He came in late, smelled faintly of liquor, looked like he'd aged 5 years since last. Weak. I didn't confront him. I just asked if he wanted tea. He said no, went straight to the couch, turned on the TV and stared through it like he wasn't even watching. I watched him for an hour. Didn't say a word. Just sat in the corner with the lamp on low and the pills in my pocket. Around midnight, he fell asleep with the remote in his hand. I took his phone from the armrest and scrolled through the voice memo app, half hoping, half terrified I'd find something. And I did. One file time-stamped 2 weeks ago. 37 seconds. I hit play. If anything happens to me, Mark's voice said, quiet, tired. Tell Danny I meant what I said. Tell Mom I'm sorry I let it get this far. That was it. No explanation, no context. Just raw exhaustion in every syllable. I stared at the screen until it went black. Then I went back to the garage and searched the paperwork in the cabinet. Tucked between a tax return and a broken flashlight was a letter in Mark's handwriting, half folded, addressed to someone named Danny. I didn't open it. Not yet. The next morning, I woke up early and called Darren Goodman, the lawyer. I need to update some estate documents, I told him. And I need to know what happens if a primary guardian becomes unfit. He didn't ask questions, just said he'd send over forms. Vanessa left around noon. Didn't say where she was going. Didn't take the kids. I didn't follow her this time. I already knew where she was going, and I didn't need more proof. I needed to plan. Around 5, Mark came into the kitchen while I was chopping carrots and leaned against the counter like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Mom, he said finally. Yeah, if I left, would you take care of the kids? My hands stopped moving. I looked up at him. His eyes were red, not from crying, just from being done. Of course, I said. He nodded once, then walked out of the room like he hadn't said anything at all. That night, I didn't sleep. I wrote a letter to the kids to be opened when they were older, just in case. I filed the security footage into separate labeled folders. I took photos of the pill bottles. I made a list of every time Vanessa had left the house alone. And then I finally opened Mark's letter to Danny. It was short, handwritten, no date. I'm trying, it said. But I can't fix this from inside. I'm going to talk to Mom and find a way out. I love you. Tell Lila. I miss her. Lila. A daughter. A second life. One he'd kept hidden. One he maybe hoped to have back. I held the letter in my hands like it was something sacred, something broken, something lost. I didn't cry. I just whispered, I'm sorry, baby, and put it in the fireproof safe under my bed. Because now I knew for sure. Mark wasn't just drifting, he was drowning. And the one person who could have saved him had been feeding him water. It happened so fast, I still don't remember if I screamed first or if it was Vanessa. But the moment Mark hit the floor, everything else stopped. We had been arguing in the kitchen again because I had asked him gently. I thought if he had considered seeing someone about the pills, about the exhaustion, about the way he looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. Vanessa had walked in halfway through all drama and venom, accusing me of planting ideas in his head, of trying to take him away from his family, from her. Mark tried to diffuse it, told us both to calm down, but Vanessa wouldn't let it go. She kept pushing, loud, sharp, saying things she couldn't take back. Maybe he wouldn't be such a wreck if you hadn't moved in and taken over, she snapped, standing between us like a referee who wanted to start a fight, not stop one. Mark raised his voice, not at her, not at me, just loud enough to try and be heard, and that's when he stumbled. 1 second he was standing, the next he was on the floor, face, pale lips already turning. Vanessa screamed. I dropped to my knees, checking for a pulse, for breath, anything. Mark, talk to me, I shouted, but his eyes were already glassy. Vanessa fumbled with her phone, shaking so hard she nearly dropped it. I took it from her and called 911 myself, gave them the address, told them my son wasn't breathing, and within minutes, the house was lit with red and white flashing lights. The EMTs worked on him right there in the kitchen. Right on. The tile where he used to eat his cereal as a teenager, where he'd proposed to Vanessa, where we used to carve pumpkins with the kids. They tried everything. Compressions, a defibrillator, an oxygen mask, but I knew. I knew the second I looked at his face that he was already gone. The ride to the hospital was quiet, except for the siren. I sat beside his stretcher, gripping his hand like I could will it back to life, whispering every apology I'd ever owed him. I should have seen it sooner, I said. I should have made you talk to me. At the hospital, they kept us in the waiting room for 20 minutes before a doctor came out. A young man with tired eyes who didn't know how to say it, who just looked at me and shook his head. We did everything we could, he said. Vanessa collapsed into a chair. I just stood there, still holding his wallet, still smelling his cologne on my sleeves. When the nurse asked if I wanted to see the body, I said yes. Vanessa didn't move. I walked into the room where they had him, clean sheets, soft lighting, like they were trying to pretend this wasn't just a glorified morgue. I sat beside him and laid my hand on his forehead. Cold. You didn't deserve this, I whispered. You were trying to get out. I know that now. Back at home, the silence was unbearable. Vanessa locked herself in their bedroom. The kids stayed with her parents for the night. I sat in the living room, replaying everything, every warning sign, every ignored moment. Then I opened my laptop and went back through the footage. The week before Wednesday morning, I found it. Vanessa in the kitchen, Mark's mug on the table, her reaching into the drawer, pulling out a bottle, tipping something in. It was subtle, smooth, practiced. She put the mug back like nothing happened. Mark came in a minute later and drank it without a thought. I stared at that footage for a long time. Then I saved it, uploaded it to my cloud storage, copied it to the USB drive I had locked in the safe. That night I didn't sleep. I opened the letter Mark had written to Danny and read it again. Tell Lila I miss her, he wrote. I didn't know who Lila was yet, but I knew she mattered. And I knew Vanessa didn't care who she stepped on to keep her story straight. The funeral was 3 days later. Vanessa played the grieving widow. In a black dress, 2 sizes too small. Fake crying into a tissue she kept dry the whole service. And then, at the gravesite, a woman approached me. Dark hair, young, holding a child with Mark's eyes. Are you Anne? She asked softly. I'm Danny. This is Lila. I didn't cry. I didn't break. I just nodded and said I've been waiting to meet you. Because now the truth wasn't just mine. It had a face, a child, a future. And Vanessa had no idea what was coming next. She looked just like him. Lila had Mark's eyes, wide and uncertain. And the way she clung to Danny's leg reminded me of how Mark used to hide behind my skirt when he was nervous. I knelt down slowly, not wanting to scare her, and offered a soft hello. She didn't speak, just stared, blinking like she was memorizing my face. Danny shifted, clearly uncomfortable, and said I didn't know if I should come. He said he'd tell you everything. He was trying to get out. I nodded. He was. I know. We didn't speak long, just a few quiet words, but she handed me an envelope before leaving. He wrote this for you, she said, in case he didn't make it. I held it like it was a piece of him still warm. Vanessa didn't see the exchange. She was too busy fake crying for the neighbors and whispering to her mother about funeral seating. I waited until I was back at home alone before I opened the envelope. Mark's handwriting was messy, rushed. Mom, if you're reading this, I didn't get out in time. I'm sorry. I tried. I was going to ask you to help me file for custody. I was going to sell my car to pay you back. I just needed more time. Danny's not the enemy. She's the only person who made me feel human again. Tell Lila I loved her. Tell Vanessa nothing. Burn this if you have to. I didn't burn it. I placed it in the fireproof box with the USB drive and the footage of Vanessa dosing his drink. Then I called Darren, the lawyer. What do I need to know about guardianship rights? I asked. He told me I'd need proof of Vanessa's unfitness, emotional, legal, or financial. I already had some, but not enough. Not yet. So I went looking. I searched the house top to bottom, carefully, quietly, while Vanessa was out with the kids or pretending to work at her overpriced co-working office. I found two things that mattered. First, a stash of opened credit card statements tucked behind. The laundry detergent Vanessa was drowning in debt. She'd maxed out 3 cards, one in Mark's name, and she hadn't made payments in months. Second, a small metal lockbox in the back of their closet. Inside was a second phone. Burner style, no fingerprint lock, just numbers and texts. Most were from a contact saved only as R. The most recent read, she's sniffing around. Too much. We need to cool it. I took photos of everything. Then I called the number. It rang twice before going to voicemail. A man's voice said, "This is Ryan." Leave it short. I didn't. I hung up. I didn't need to leave a trail. The next day, I called Mark's therapist's office, introduced myself as his estate representative, and requested any documentation I might need for the guardianship application. They sent a summary of sessions and accidentally a digital folder that included a voice recording labeled Joint Session Vanessa Only. I clicked play and sat still. Her voice came through clear. He kept saying he wanted to leave, that he wanted to take the kids. I told him no one would believe him. Not with the pills, not with the drinking. I didn't mean to push it that far, but honestly, part of me hoped he'd just stop talking. I gave him something. I don't remember what. I just needed sleep. I listened twice, saved the file, and didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Vanessa came home that night, cheerful, like she'd forgotten a man just died in this house. She offered to order Thai food. I said nothing. She asked if I'd take the kids. For the weekend, while she decompressed, I agreed. Not because I wanted to help her, but because it gave me time. While she was gone, I filed the first petition for emergency guardianship. I submitted financial proof video evidence and the audio file with a typed transcript. Darren told me it could take weeks, maybe months. Unless you have something public, he said. Something that tips public perception in your favor. Judges read the news too. That's when I called Jules, the host of a local parenting podcast. She had 300,000 followers and a reputation for exposing bad moms with grace and fury. I didn't tell her everything. I just sent the clip anonymously with the subject line, "A Mother's Secret Confession." She replied 2 hours later. Posting. Tonight, I closed my laptop, turned off the lights, and waited for the war to start. I didn't sleep the night I filed for guardianship. Not because I was scared of Vanessa. Those days were long gone. But because I knew the court wasn't going to make it easy. Not with the mess Mark left behind. Not with no signed will and a house full of buried secrets. The court clerk gave me a filing date 2 weeks out and told me if I wanted emergency status, I'd need proof. Hard proof that those kids were in danger. I had some of it. The therapist tape, the drug footage, the financial mess. but nothing with blood on it. Nothing that couldn't be twisted by a decent lawyer. And Vanessa had one now. A fast-talking woman from Des Moines who looked like she ate grandparents for lunch and posted fake motivational quotes on Instagram in between custody wins. I found out through a neighbor that Vanessa had hired her after the podcast episode started circulating. The episode hadn't gone viral in the way I hoped, but it hit enough ears to shake things up. Especially at the kids' school, where a couple teachers pulled them aside and started asking quiet questions. I hadn't leaked the file myself. I sent it anonymously through a burner email to a local parenting podcast that focused on maternal burnout and legal gray zones. They aired it with a disclaimer, bleeped a few names, but anyone who knew Vanessa could connect the dots. The voice was unmistakably hers, and the words didn't lie. I didn't care if he didn't wake up. That sentence haunted me, not just because she said it, but because she meant it. When Vanessa found out about the leak, she lost control. I came home one afternoon to find her in my room door, unlocked drawers rifled through, looking for something she never should have me touched. "Where is it?" she asked, voice shaking, mascara smudged halfway to her jawline. "Where's the original file?" I didn't answer. I just looked at her like the ghost she was becoming. "You're going to ruin their lives," she hissed, meaning the kids. "You're going to poison them against me." "You already did," I said. She lunged not to hit me, but to snatch the phone out of my hand. I stepped back. "Touch me again, and I swear I'll call the police, and this time they'll believe me." She stopped, took a deep breath. Then something changed in her eyes. Not panic, not fear, just cold calculation. "You want them," she said. "Take them, but don't come crying when they end up just like him." And then she walked out like she hadn't just set the whole house on fire. That night, I packed go bags for the kids. Toothbrushes, clothes, school IDs, their favorite snacks. I didn't know what would happen in court, but I wasn't letting them come back to that woman if I lost. The next morning, I got a text from my neighbor Margot. Someone who'd been friendly with Vanessa, shared wine on Friday nights, whispered gossip at PTA meetings. It read, "Anne, we need to talk. Vanessa said some things about you. I don't know what to believe." I invited her over for tea and showed her everything. The court papers, the letter from Mark the therapist tape. Margot sat there for 20 minutes without blinking. "She told me you were emotionally unstable," she said. "Said you were manipulating the kids and trying to take her house." "She said that because she knows she's about to lose," I replied. Margot left that afternoon and posted a Facebook update that started with "Sometimes people aren't who they seem." Within 24 hours, 3 other neighbors unfriended Vanessa. I didn't cheer. I didn't celebrate. I just filed it under evidence of community instability, printed the post, and added it to my court folder. The day before the hearing, Vanessa came home drunk. I could smell the wine before I even heard her stumble in. She kicked over a plant in the hallway, laughed, then started yelling at the wall. She thinks she can take them. She thinks she's some savior. I told the kids to stay in their room, locked the door, and waited. At 3:12 a.m., I heard footsteps. My door handle jiggled, then a whisper. "I should have buried you when I had the chance." I didn't respond. I had the whole thing recorded on camera, audio, clear, time stamped. I emailed the clip to my lawyer with the subject line, "Final Exhibit." That morning, I ironed my best blouse, packed the court documents, USB drives, photos, and 3 letters. 1 from Mark, 1 from Danny, and 1 I'd written to the judge myself. I wasn't going to win with rage. I was going to win with precision. The kind Frank used to say could slice a lie in half before it had time to breathe. I looked in the mirror and didn't see a widow or a mother or a landlord. I saw a line in the sand, and Vanessa was about to trip over it. The courthouse was smaller than I remembered, just 1 floor, 4 rooms, and a hallway that smelled like lemon cleaner and dust. But when I walked in that morning with my folder tucked under my arm and my heart beating loud enough to crack tile, it felt like I was stepping into a war zone I'd spent months preparing for. The clerk checked me in eyes, flicking between me and Vanessa, who was already sitting on the bench in her best imitation of fragile widow. Black skirt, oversized sunglasses, hair pulled back like she was starring in a low-budget crime drama. Her lawyer was next to her flipping through a manila folder, whispering something that made Vanessa smirk. And I knew right then she thought this was going to be easy. That she thought I'd crumble under pressure or come off like some senile old woman with a vendetta. But I wasn't there for revenge. I was there for the kids, for Mark. For everything she'd stolen and ruined and lied about. They called us. 10 minutes later, and the courtroom was quiet, except for the sound of heels on wood, and the judge's voice asking us to remain seated, my lawyer spoke first. Nothing dramatic, just a calm outline of events supported by time-stamped evidence, expert-reviewed audio files, community statements, and my sworn declaration. Then we played the tape. The room went still when Vanessa's voice filled the speakers, shaky and fast, but clear as glass. I didn't mean to kill him, but I didn't care if he didn't wake up. Her lawyer objected, called it inadmissible, but the judge waved it off. This is not a criminal trial, he said. And this is her voice. Yes. The lawyer didn't answer. Vanessa sat, frozen fingers digging into her own arm like she wanted to crawl out of her skin. I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes forward, chin up, hands steady on the table. When it was my turn to speak, I stood. No notes, no script, just the truth. I buried my son 6 weeks ago, I said. I buried the boy I raised. The man who tried to do everything right and who died alone in a house where the people who should have loved him most were feeding him poison, silence, and fear. I'm not asking for vengeance. I'm asking for safety, for the chance to raise my grandchildren in a home where they aren't tools, where they aren't witnesses to chaos, and where they can grow up knowing love instead of fear. You've heard her say she didn't care if he died. Ask yourself what makes you think she cares if her children get hurt. The room was dead quiet. Even the judge didn't speak for a moment. Then he nodded, told us he would review the full evidence overnight and deliver his ruling at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Vanessa's lawyer tried to request an immediate dismissal citing emotional manipulation. The judge denied it. Bring the children tomorrow, he said. Decision will be final. Outside, the air was hot and stale. Vanessa tried to speak to me in the hallway, said something about how I was destroying her life, how I didn't understand what it was like to be alone. I didn't stop walking. I didn't respond. Because she wasn't alone. She had made sure of that with every lie, every pill, every night she spent in someone else's arms while my son died under her roof. I drove home, picked up the kids from Darlene's, made them dinner, bathed them, read them stories. I tucked them into bed and sat in the hallway for an hour, just listening to them breathe. I thought about Mark's voice memo, about the way he had whispered my name like it was a lifeline, about how he'd ask me to take care of them if he ever left. Would you take care of the kids? That question haunted me more than his death. Because he knew. He knew where things were headed, and he still stayed. That night, I wrote one last letter, sealed it, addressed it to the kids, and put it in the fireproof box with everything else. If something went wrong tomorrow, I wanted them to have every piece of truth I could give. I walked through the house one more time. I passed the kitchen where Mark collapsed, the living room where I first saw the affair unfold on camera, the hallway where Vanessa whispered that she should have buried me. Every corner was soaked in memory, every room a monument to how fast a home can rot. I went to bed without setting an alarm. I knew I'd wake up. I didn't sleep much anymore, not in the way that mattered. I just waited for morning for the verdict, for the last card to fall. I got to the courthouse before the sun came up, parked in the same spot as yesterday, sat in the silence for 15 minutes before walking in, because I needed that moment, needed to be alone, with the weight of what this day meant. Because no matter what the judge said today would end something, either Vanessa's hold on those kids or my fight to protect them, and I wasn't ready for either. I walked in with my folder tucked under my arm. Same blouse, same shoes, same stare. Vanessa arrived 10 minutes later with her lawyer and the kids dressed like she hadn't slept at all, wearing sunglasses, even though it was cloudy, holding their hands too tightly, like she thought she could fake maternal instinct by clenching it into her knuckles. The kids looked tired, confused, like they'd been pulled from bed and wrapped in clothes they didn't pick. I didn't approach. I just gave them a soft nod, let them see me, their grandmother, the one who made pancakes on Saturdays and tucked in stuffed animals every night for a month. They didn't wave, they didn't smile, but they saw me. That was enough. The courtroom filled slowly. A few reporters from local outlets were there now, probably tipped off by the podcast fallout, and I saw Margot slip into the back row, arms crossed, jaw tight, here to see how it ended after flipping sides. The judge entered right on time, robe straight, expression unreadable, and told everyone to sit. He didn't waste time. He said he'd reviewed all documents, cross-verified the audio recording with court-authorized text, found no indication of tampering, and confirmed the authenticity of Mark's voice memo through phone records. Then he turned to Vanessa. "You've been given opportunity to respond to these claims," he said. "You've denied them under oath, yet provided no counter-evidence to refute the material presented. You've failed to provide a stable explanation for your financial and custodial inconsistencies. This court does not find you a reliable guardian at this time." Vanessa stood up, started crying. Not real tears, loud sobs, like a show with no audience, shaking her head and mumbling, "You can't do this! You can't take my kids!" But the judge didn't even blink. "Ms. Whitaker," he said, turning. "To me, you are granted full physical and legal custody of Olivia and Mason Whitaker, effective immediately. Visitation rights for Vanessa Whitaker are suspended pending further psychological evaluation. This ruling is final." For a second, I couldn't move. I just sat there stunned. Hands clenched so tightly, I thought the folder might snap. Then I looked over at the kids who were watching everything with wide, confused eyes. Olivia reached for her brother's hand. Mason didn't pull away. That's when I stood. I walked forward slowly, like I didn't want to scare them. Like I wanted them to know this wasn't a fight anymore. This was home. Vanessa tried to rush them, stood up, and shouted their names. But a bailiff stepped in, blocking her, and the kids turned away from her, like their little bodies understood something their minds couldn't say. I knelt down, opened my arms, and they walked into them. No words, no screaming, just arms around my shoulders and tiny faces buried in my neck. I walked them out of that courthouse while Vanessa screamed behind us. I didn't look back. Outside, the sky had started to drizzle, soft and cold and steady. I put them in the car, buckled them in myself, turned on their favorite playlist, the one Mark used to play during long drives to the lake, and we drove home. No police, no more forms, no more threats, just 3 bodies in a car, quiet and breathing, heading back to a house that finally belonged to the living. At home, I showed them their rooms, gave them snacks, turned on cartoons, and sat in the kitchen without speaking for 20 minutes. Not out of shock, out of release. The kind that doesn't look like joy or relief. Just stillness. I picked up the phone and called Danny. Told her what happened. She cried. Said thank you. Asked when she could see them. I said soon. Then I went. Into Mark's room. It hadn't changed much. I hadn't let myself touch it. His old baseball glove was still on the shelf. His cologne still on the dresser. I sat on his bed and opened his phone, the one I'd kept charged in my drawer for weeks, and played the voice memo one last time. If anything happens to me, tell Danny I meant what I said. Tell Mom I'm sorry I let it get this far. I know, baby, I whispered. I know you tried. And for the first time since he died, I let myself cry. Not quiet tears, not polite ones, the kind that wreck your chest and don't ask permission, because the fight was over. But the ache never would be. The house is quiet now, not the kind of quiet that makes you lonely, but the kind that lets you breathe, lets you finally hear yourself think without fear or footsteps in the hall that don't belong. And for the first time in a long time, it feels like mine again. Not because the deed says so, or because a judge granted me custody, but because it holds my people, even if one of them only exists now in the things he left behind. I wake up before the kids most mornings make coffee stand on the porch in Frank's old robe and listen to the hum of a neighborhood that finally doesn't look at me like I'm the problem. I take care of them. Olivia and Mason. Every breakfast, every bath, every story, like it's a sacred promise I'm keeping for someone who asked me to do one last thing before he slipped away. They're adjusting. Slowly. Mason barely speaks in full sentences anymore. Not since the court day. But he doesn't flinch when I tuck him in. And he holds Olivia's hand every time we cross the street. Olivia still draws pictures of her dad. Stick figures with short brown hair and wide shoulders. Always smiling, always holding her hand. Sometimes I find them folded and hidden in her pillowcase. I never move them. I just smooth them out and let them stay. A week after the ruling, I converted the guest room into what we now call Dad's room. We didn't decorate it like a shrine, just a quiet space with his guitar, some framed photos, his favorite flannel on a hook, and a lamp with soft light that makes the air feel calm. The kids go in sometimes when they miss him. They sit on the floor, play his music, look at the photo books I printed for them. I don't follow. That room is theirs to keep as long as they need it. Danny came by last weekend, brought Lila with her, and when Olivia saw her little sister for the first time, she didn't cry. She just stared, then asked if they could play. They sat in the yard with sidewalk chalk for 2 hours while Danny and I talked in low voices about shared custody ideas, about grief, about moving forward without pretending any of this made sense. She still cries when she talks about Mark. So do I. But we don't apologize for it anymore. The house itself has changed. I painted the kitchen, replaced the broken pantry door, took down all the cameras. I wanted the kids to know they weren't being watched anymore, that this wasn't a house full of traps and silence, that it could be a home again if we worked hard enough. I've kept a lot of things locked away, the USB drives, the court transcripts, the financial records, but not because I'm hiding, because I'm done fighting. That war ended in the courtroom, and every victory since has been about gentleness, not control. Last night, Mason sat next to me on the porch and asked, "Will we stay here forever?" I didn't lie. I said, as long as I can keep you safe, yes. He didn't ask what that meant. He just leaned his head against my arm and watched the sun drop behind the neighbor's shed. After he went to bed, I stood in the hallway for a long time, listening to the sound of 2 small children sleeping in peace. A sound I hadn't heard in this house since Mark was their age. I walked into my room, picked up his phone, the one. I couldn't bear to turn off and open the last voice memo again. I didn't hit play this time. I just stared at the file like it might somehow rewrite itself, give me something I hadn't noticed before. It didn't. It just sat there, unchanged. But I had. I finally understood what he meant. He didn't say goodbye in that memo. He left instructions. He trusted me. And that's what I hold on to. Not the hate, not the trial, not even the pain, just the trust. The final gift a son gave his mother. Vanessa never came back after the ruling. She didn't appeal, didn't send letters, nothing. Just vanished like she'd been swallowed by her own lies. Part of me thought I'd feel something when it ended. Rage, satisfaction, maybe even grief for her. But all I felt was empty space. And honestly, that's better than poison. Because this house, this life, these kids, they're not part of a revenge story. They're part of a rebuilding, brick by brick, day by day. And if you asked me today what I remember most about that first moment when she stood there and said, "This isn't your home anymore," I'd tell you this. She was wrong. I never left. I just waited for it to be mine again, right now. I'm sitting at the same kitchen table they once tried to push me out of, telling this story while my grandkids sleep down the hall. Safe, loved, and finally home.